Try not to print so much.
Oh,
Yeah, so have everything.
well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 9th, 2022 Personnel Board meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Before I really want to start through the agenda, I want to welcome Kate Ryan, who is a member, became official last night. No, Monday night. And so this is obviously our first meeting. Could you maybe just, and I apologize for not giving you a heads up, just sort of recap a little bit about your background and that would, I think, be helpful to clearly to people who are viewing us from afar.
Yeah, sure.
So, great.
So I've lived in Concord since 2016. In my professional life, I am the town, or I just gave myself a promotion. I'm the HR manager for the town of Wayland, one of our neighbors. I've been there since last March, so it's definitely a big learning curve, but I do everything from recruitment to IOD to collective bargaining and kind of everything in between. Before that, I worked at Staples in their HR department and I managed their severance processes. I did all their employment policies to keep them up to date. A little bit of everything anyway. HR is kind of a little bit of everything. So I've got a lot of experience in that area. And I worked in state government prior to that, doing mostly policy research and analysis. So.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank
Glad
you.
to have you as a member.
Glad to be here.
And I'm gonna make certain that we go through and make sure we have a quorum. Nancy Carlin,
Here.
Wisconsin,
Here.
Ryan,
Here.
and Bill Rochek. So we have a quorum, and we can proceed with the agenda. We will not. What are we putting in the positive? Members of the employees, or the employees who had made their appeal, had asked the personnel board to postpone the portion of the meeting that deals with the facts finding and questioning. Now, depending upon, and I think we're likely going to have it at our next meeting, they will attend the next meeting. I don't know that for a fact, however, but that would be our intention. And then we can continue the discussion and gain what additional information we feel that we need as the personnel board in order to proceed. So there is clearly the opportunity, and it sort of depends on will of the personnel board. I think there's sort of three things that we could cover still that may help us further the process. One is, what are the remaining questions that we have that we would like to have answered? That way, not only the town, but also perhaps any one of the appealing employees would be able to respond, if there are any. Now that's a big if. Second of all, we could focus on what the board's role is and what does making a decision mean. Talked a little bit about that at last meeting, but I think it's worthy of sort of going back over what avenues can we follow or are available to us. And then third thing would be, okay, next steps. What are we gonna do? But I think that's pretty self-evident because we need to have the employees present to be able to hear, respond, question, whatever is appropriate. So I want to go back to the first point I made. Would you like to entertain talking about and having duly noted in the minutes remaining questions or not? So I'm going to start maybe over here with Nancy. Would this be of value to you to make a note or list of what your remaining questions are?
Yeah, I think it's important to, I have gone over stuff several times and I still am not able to really put stuff together, to be honest with you. there's so much information and stuff that we ask that I don't know if we have all the answers, so I would like to, I think that's important.
Okay, and can you give any specific examples of what perhaps would be helpful to you to have some either additional information, additional discussion, additional clarification?
I had written a few things down. One of the things is that, you know, when I looked over, and I really was not prepared to make any kind of particular speech, but when I looked everything over, it seems that these 5 people were the ones that did not receive awards out of, I had like 30 people or something. And it just seems like I couldn't quite still figure out why. I went through the fact that we weren't looking at them, we were looking at the position and them. But they had been, they'd been in service for a long time. And they had a lot of years, I think from 15 or 20 to 40 years together. And one of my things is, you know, they obviously get a review. They must have their job description and their performance review done every year. So I don't think if I heard anything that they were, that there were no issues with that. So I just feel like I just don't know, have enough idea of why these 5, okay, even though I have other information, why they still were not given the extra 6%.
Okay, now, just so that I can clarify that for everybody, it's my understanding that we are not talking about salary increases, we're talking about structure changes.
Right.
So these 5 individuals, where everyone else in their unit, their group in town, they only got a 3% salary structure adjustment compared to the 9%. So that's, I think, an important, just to make sure we're using language that's specific. So as I'm listening to you, you're still at this point wanting to make certain you as fully understand as possible why those people were not in the 9% structure change.
Right. I know there was a lot of information given, but it just doesn't seem to have.
Okay. Fair, yeah, fair. Any other specific questions that come to mind?
Only the fact that I feel that they went through the process. I think that they went through seeing everybody from the town manager to their manager, etc. And that's why they didn't feel like they've gotten really any kind of an answer, and that's why they're here.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like they did do the process, and I had a few more that I can't quite think of now that maybe came in, but I wrote some.
Okay. Liz, I'm gonna ask you if you some specific ones in mind.
Yes, I do, and I don't have a mic in front of me, but I'm heard okay. Is that?
Yeah, there's one central mic and speaker.
Okay, all right, so, yeah, I tend to speak more loudly if I'm worried about that, so I won't grandstand here. I agree completely with Nancy, that I was not able to really have a clarity, yet on what happened. And so there were a couple of details that I'd like to have that we didn't receive yet. And one is a bit more of longevity. So I'd like to understand how those ranges have changed over the last, say, 2 to 3 range changes. So if that happens on an annual basis or a biannual basis, whatever is the normal cadence of those changes, I would like to see some history of that to better understand the circumstances and how it led to that. So that's the first point. I'll add this into the minutes
Yeah.
later.
Mhm. Right.
Okay, since I'm the note taker. So, if I miss something, but I see, that Amy's taking notes, so you'll tell me what I said if I miss putting it in the minutes. Thank you. The other thing that I was disappointed was that, that their manager did not participate last meeting in presenting on, about the rationale. So I understand that HR, and Amy, you took that role to play for HR, but if there was more of an understanding that could come from the line manager, I would have been, I would have liked to hear their position. And that too got me thinking a bit about that. And so now I'm going to circle back to my first point. I'd really be interested in that history or longevity of range changes for those subordinate to the 5 and superordinate to the 5. So understanding what, I guess it's Dave, I'm sorry, I'm really bad at last names, so I don't know his last name, but what his range changes have been over time as well. You know, so above them and on their teams, because my understanding from their first presentation was that they were standalone in that, and that they were subordinates whose ranges now were above their own. And I think that that kind of the order of hierarchy and how things isn't clear to me that was satisfied in changes. So I'd like to see more about that. So longevity, some history, as I described it, and also just recognizing that I would have liked to have heard from their own manager in the procedures. And then a procedural thing for us, if I may. I think, Bill, you did a great job last meeting to set out what's the role of this committee in this process. It's really a recommendation is what I'm taking away. That we recommend then to the town manager further information. Do I have that am I understand that correctly?
You know, I think yes and no.
Okay.
That sort of goes to the second point here, but that I made about our role.
Yeah.
And I'd rather sort of
Handle that separately.
handle that separately.
Perfect.
I think it's a very important point.
Yeah.
But I'd rather not confuse or not. Okay.
Understood. That I'll put a note that'll come up later.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else though?
No, I do think that it gets into the next steps. What's our role and how and what and to whom do we report in those recommendations? So that I'll leave those for later.
Okay. I'm gonna go next, and I
Yeah,
think
please
if
do.
there's any, you know, I'm gonna like, hey, if there's happens to be something, but would be unfair for me
Yeah.
to go
Please.
press for anything. So, and I was trying to find my my notes here, but one of the questions that I'm still interested in knowing about has to do with actually how the information, the decision about the range structure change, how that was communicated. Who communicated it? Was it done in a group setting? Was it done individually? What participation, if any, did HR or an HR representative have in that process? Again, what we're doing right now, just for anyone who's joined us, is we are postponing at the request of the employees to a later date to continue the in-depth exploration of facts. But what we're doing right now is only to elicit from the members of the board what are the areas of questions that we have going forward. So I know people come in late and therefore probably wondering what's going on. And so that's my attempt to bring everybody up to speed. So I would, again, like to know how this was communicated. Was there a script that was prepared by the town that was given to managers in the town, especially those, well, you know, there could be multiple scripts, I recognize that, but in this particular case, so I'd like to explore that. I'd like to, that's one area, the communication piece. The second piece is how many times in the last X years have there been instances in which certain grades within a group or in the family, job family, that the increased structure change hasn't been the same. I'll make that point very clear. But the idea is, what is the history? Haven't there, in fact, been in the town situations in which the presentation to the town meeting actually had situations in which grades, structure changes were not the same? It would be interesting to know that. I would be interested to know that. And I guess it would be interesting to know if there were instances, how was that communicated to employees and to managers? And I think the manager piece is critically important because obviously the employees look to the individual responsible for the group for information and answers and so forth. I think there was a third one, but I have to say, I can't find my note. So I think for right now, those two are probably more than sufficient to make a note in the record, in the minutes. All right. Any other thoughts from any of us in terms of other questions, areas that we would like to that are still questions to us? Okay, let's go on then to the second point, which I mentioned at the beginning, and that is, what is the board's role? And last time we were together, and I actually listened to this again, is my point in this whole process is that we're here to make a determination. We're not here to say what we would do and have done in this situation. We're not here, I don't believe, and obviously open for discussion with everybody. I don't think we're here to micromanage in this case, the Human Resources Department in terms of their judgment of what they recommended. So I am of the opinion that in an advisory kind of capacity, what that means to me is getting the facts and then making a determination is, okay, I know what the facts are, I know what the thinking was, I know what the history is, and was that reasonable? Period. Was it reasonable? Not whether we would make that same decision, but whether it was reasonable. So that's sort of I guess, the foundation of how I'm thinking about this. And if you then extrapolate from that foundation, then you can go down, I think, a couple paths. One is we can say it was reasonable. One path. Second path is we can say we don't think it was reasonable. Third path, I think, is it was reasonable, but we encourage the town manager to review the case, to review the situation. Now, there may be other flavors here, and I don't mean to make this overly simplistic, but again, my mind is reasonable, unreasonable, and reasonable, but we would like the town manager to review the case again. Any feedback?
I'd like to hear more about path 3. So reasonable is path 1. Not reasonable would also be a recommendation that the town manager review.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Sure,
Because
sure, sure.
we're not here to adjudicate, we're not
We're not.
here to make a
That's right.
definitive
That's right.
statement, but if we're recommending to town manager,
That it was unreasonable.
right, then obviously, then the idea is that we're recommending a review. Right,
That would be the implication. Yes, yes. I'm trying to, in some ways, say unreasonable, but then you let the town manager decide what she would like to do. The third avenue is reasonable, but we want you to, we encourage you. It's our belief that we'd like you to review the case one last time. And maybe these are all, maybe those 2 and 3 are all of them. Maybe I'm making more of this than I, but it gives us with the third option, sort of the affirmative position that, okay, we would like the town manager to make one final review. We're not saying what she should or shouldn't do, but just one final review. So, is that any clear, Liz, or is this hard to? Is this not clear on the differentiation?
well, I guess it leads me to another question, so, I guess I wasn't clear, town manager has already reviewed.
Correct.
So it hasn't been just the manager and the HR department, it's already gone through town manager. All was approved. And so when we're saying reasonable, don't have to look at it again, not reasonable, you should look at it again. Or it's reasonable, but you should probably, so the third option is really saying it's, I guess I'm not as comfortable with that, because it's saying, we agree with you, but make a show.
Okay.
Right, and I understand how that can help, right? But since if we're in a position of just recommending, then I think clarity around the recommendation of yes or no, and here's some questions to answer.
Okay.
Might be sufficient.
Okay.
But
I'm listening to you, and I agree. I think that makes a lot more sense, and it's clear in terms of it doesn't raise side issues or other issues that are really not germane. So I thank you for that, and I think you're right.
okay, so I'll put that in the minutes, unless Nancy and
No, I think that either we agree with the decision that was made, or we feel that we don't agree. I mean, or we'd like to see some more information before we make.
But I want to, and I don't mean to overly make the semantic this, but if the decision was reasonable,
Yeah.
or was not reasonable.
Right. Okay, right.
It's
Yeah.
not that we agree
Yeah.
or we don't agree. I don't think that's where we want to go.
Okay.
I don't think those are the right words.
okay, so a recommendation on reasonableness.
Right.
I'll use that
Yeah,
terminology.
so that would be fine. Unless you feel uncomfortable with that.
No,
Okay.
I just wanted to, because we're getting into fine tuning, and I just want to make sure I do that properly in the minutes, that's all. And Kate, did you have, because you kind of been in the midst of these sorts of things, I think, so.
Yeah, I guess I don't feel like I have enough of context to understand what the issue is and what the employees brought forward to feel like I can comment on it.
Yeah.
I can certainly, do my research and hopefully get up to speed, but.
In if we go up a couple levels, Kate, have you encountered similar questions regarding, since you've been there and maybe not, wage and classification issues?
Yeah, I mean, we do, Wayland has its own personnel board and we do reclassifications all the time, but I've never encountered where we've had sort of a group of similar type positions on a similar grade that have been reclassified in a different way. So that's new to me.
I think that's, you've answered the question.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. So I'm going to say that we're sort of to next steps, and I guess next steps would be to hold a meeting or have the employees present. We go through the remaining questions. We make a determination as to the board's role. Is it reasonable or is it not reasonable? Was it the decision reasonable or not? Are we in agreement with that?
Yeah, I just think that, I mean, I know we have a lot of information, and I've gone over it and over it and over it, but, I guess I'm still trying to find out, trying to get that information that will tell me that, either we need to, it's either reasonable or, and it's okay, or not. I'm not really there.
Yeah.
One thing is the job description. I know everybody has a job description. I know that yearly they have performance review. I don't remember if I heard whether they had their reviews and they were fine.
So this will be in the open questions
Okay.
for discussion
Okay.
next time. Good.
Wait, so, but to clarify, so Nancy and I've written down what you said. So, you said, I don't have confidence that I have enough information. And so if we're in the next meeting and we still don't have the information, then we're relying on, in a sense, hearsay. If we're saying, please tell us what your opinion, you know, because then it's not evidence-based, right? We need the data. So it could well be, and I would say the same, like you said, I didn't write it down yet, so I'm thinking here, you said you wanted job descriptions and you wanted past understanding of their job performance reviews.
So I don't know if they were not moved forward with the 6% raise because they were not performing as they should be. I didn't get that feeling, but I also didn't have anything to say yes or no to that. And, you know, I guess when you look at 30 odd employees and people move forward with a 9%, and then you've got these 5 people that didn't, they've been here a long time. And I know we looked at positions and not the person, but I just don't, it just doesn't gel with me. So that's really where I'm coming
Okay,
from.
all right. It's partly why I asked the question for next time is, what's the history?
Right.
What's the history? Because it's one thing for this to be a one-off,
Right.
but it's a very different thing if in fact there's a history of this kind of structure changes that have taken place in the town. And what have been the, you know, what have been, I guess, the results of having done it that way. Again, the thing here is that, and I think everybody understands, it's not, we're not here to judge we're not here to say this is what we would have done. We're here to say, was what was done reasonable or not reasonable? Yeah. All right. Yes.
Can I just say, and to make that reasonableness decision, it has to be based on the data, the evidence.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm with Nancy, that I don't feel I have all the evidence at my fingertips to make that decision. So yours is what's the history, what happened in the past, have these kinds of shifts where these 5 didn't have the same shift, different shifts taken place on a normal basis. Question 1. So I'm with you with wanting that. My interest is, I'm sorry, Nancy's interest is performance reviews, jobs descriptions, so we can understand more about, and my interest is in subordinates, and those ranges over some history there, so that we can see the shift over time and what was happening. Now, Amy, you explained to us with the, you know, with the pandemic, things were very wacky, and there were some other things. There was also descriptions of data used, but not, I don't feel I have enough clarity over the data used. And that would be very helpful before we get in front of the individuals, in my view. Is that?
But in terms of, so you're looking, just I'm gonna clarify in my own mind.
Yeah.
So you're looking for hard copies of the data that was
Yeah.
used in order to make the decision,
Yeah.
in addition to whatever the mean we have the mean data.
Right.
Okay,
Right,
so
but there was a lot of subjectivity, right? So the data was hard to use in circumstances with everything else. So some of that is in the slides that you presented last time. But I didn't feel that the slide deck and the data were connected in a way that I could understand where the decision got made.
so I think that's excellent. We'll explore that the next meeting.
Okay.
Amy, you had a pointer raised up.
Yeah, I just, when you're talking about reasonable and not reasonable and what this decision is, I just want to provide some context that when we talk about the salary structures, those, as you know, are recommendations that I bring forward after working with the town manager and really with the authority of the town manager. But it's the personnel board that ultimately recommends those to town meeting, and it was town meeting that voted those. So the town manager does not have the authority to go back and change those ranges. Just want to clarify or make sure everybody understands that. Those ranges are about the position and it's about that process. So if you determine that the way that the ranges were modified was not reasonable, you'd have to look at then what's to be done about that, and it would really go, you know, then there's the question about going back to town meeting or of bylaw change or something like that. And that's, you haven't gone down the path of what your options would be there, but I just want to remind you that it's not just a recommendation back to the town manager to change those ranges. The town manager does not have the authority to do that.
Okay, well, that's a good point. That's a good point to add to our pool of
But
information.
so if they're not within the ranges for that position, they could get that extra 6% if it was decided it would, right? But if they're out of the range or at the top of the range, they could not get any.
And I think you're getting into the difference between employee pay rates for individuals versus the pay ranges. And it sounds like we should talk about that more as part of the.
Let's
follow-up.
we'll defer that to you.
And I'll put it in the minutes, but I think, Amy, this is a very significant point. What you're saying is, this was already approved. It went through town meeting. And so the stamp is on it. So even if you recommend unreasonable to the town manager, she doesn't have the authority to change. And so then I will, and I'll put in the minutes, I'll refer us to the Personnel Study Task Force and an understanding of what kind of information has to be understood and brought before the Personnel Board before town meeting recommendations are made. And if this is now coming up and which we may not, I don't know yet, right? If we end up saying, look, we do recommend to the town manager, this is unreasonable, and you might want to look at that again, and you're saying, doesn't matter, it's a done deal, right? Then it might be that we really have to understand how those warrants go forward a little bit more clearly and not get here again, in essence, right? Because if this is, well, move on, it's done, or we have to reassess at town meeting a year later, you see what I mean? Then there's something in the process that didn't work well, and that needs to be addressed. And I think that some of that is in who talks to which committees at what times, et cetera. So I think there's some deeper issues that you just signified with that. Yeah.
If I may, I just wanted to add one other caveat to the discussion, which quite possibly may come up as we're discussing. I'm sorry, Kelly Hebert, work with the town manager's office and with HR. Is the factor or the criteria having to do with market and the market rate on certain positions, but not all. And the reason why I think that that's so relevant is because of the demand in the market for particular titles and positions. In this case, you know, there was, whether you consider it subjective or not, there is a reality that we're dealing with in the light department, and that some positions are much more challenging and difficult to fill and to keep filled. And so the market and the evaluation of the market rate and how that impacts our classification grid is very relevant to a lot of the pieces that we're considering now with our new pay and classification plan. And I definitely agree, questions about the process, how can we avoid this situation in the future? I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of the fact that there are certain positions that are classified a certain way, and they're giving a certain range, and the market for particular positions will come into play. And I think that that's a piece of this discussion that is relevant to this particular case. But we also need to keep in mind as we move forward, because these are some of the issues that we're dealing with our existing classification study.
Okay.
Just want to add to that.
And certainly, I heard all that. You know, it sort of goes back in some ways to the quality of the communication that took place, and were there any shortcomings to that? So there are multiple facets, obviously, to this particular situation. But I think, you know, it may be appropriate, unless Nancy, you have anything more to add right now, or Liz, or
No.
Kate?
I just want to clarify one thing, Bill. You said multiple facets to you brought up the communication piece.
Yeah.
And I think you were talking about the communication between the managers and the subordinates or their teams,
Well,
or between the personnel board and the town manager. I wasn't quite clear.
Well, I think specifically I was referring to the communication between the HR organization and the town management structure, and what helpful, was there a script and so forth? Was there a tool that was used in order to make that as efficient and as accurate and as helpful as possible? But I think that clearly it does go back to the study task force report, which is the whole communication issue, and we will get to that. There you'll find that matrix that's in the materials, but it does address communication. So the communication, my thought was initially just based on from the town management to employee managers. But I certainly think that's you have a yes, Amy?
Yeah, one last point. I would just suggest that the board members take a look at the personnel bylaw, particularly section 6 compensation plan, although I think section 5 classification may also be relevant, just to be sure that you understand the authorities and the process that that's outlined there. For example, when Liz mentioned, is it a done deal? Well, yes, something was approved at town meeting. But then what happens if the personnel board decides that a change is warranted partway through the year? You decide that. The personnel bylaw addresses that and authorities and gives the personnel board the authority to make changes and recommend them at the next town meeting. So I think it's critical that the board look at that and be aware.
Okay, that point is noted. So I'm going to ask for any citizen commentary on our discussion at this point. And the discussion at this point has talked about what are the remaining questions and what is our role. And looks like can't font, is that?
So, and I've got it on the screen. So if so, please raise your hand. I don't think you can.
We've got somebody, Mark, Mr. Howell.
There's a raised hand.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, it's not showing here. So I guess
Oh, there it is, yeah.
Mr. Howell? Or not?
I think it's Terry Ackerman that wants to speak.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's just the cursor that you're seeing, I think. Or something, I'm not sure.
Well, go ahead, Mark, if you were first.
No, I don't have any comment at this time.
Yeah.
We're with Terry or?
I just wanted to briefly comment on a little bit of confusion. It's my understanding that the performance review of an employee is the data that you use for that individual's salary. But when you're setting a range, I thought that the data was about the market and the qualifications and the experience of the job itself, and not about the performance review of the employee. So if that's correct, then some of the information that the board is looking for really might not be relevant to this case, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, Terry, thank you. It does make sense. Any reaction from? I mean, Terry raises an excellent point, so.
So I think, yeah, and Terry, if I'm just summarizing that point, it's saying the difference between assessing the position and assessing the person, and there should be a line there. And that's what you're reminding us of.
Yeah,
Right.
that's my take.
So are we okay then to take that off the list of requested information? That
I would suggest we do. I would say, because I don't think it addresses the heart of the structure issue.
okay.
Thank you, Terry. All right, we're gonna, I think, move on to in the agenda, and we have some classification actions. We'll let Amy move ahead with these three positions.
I have every paper imaginable. I keep on looking, but I left that at home, so, oh my God, sorry.
Well, the good news is we can ask you at home to get it.
Okay, so so there are three classification requests that are on the agenda. So the personnel board is responsible for approving job title additions to the class and comp plan, and then putting that classification job title into a salary grade. And so action can be taken at this meeting, and it can go into effect, but it also needs to be ratified at the next town meeting. So then we'll keep track of it and then bring it forward. The town manager is the one that has the authority to create the positions within approved budgets and all that, to define the duties, to determine what the roles are. So and to determine whether the position is needed. If that's not the personnel board's role, the personnel board's role is again is directly related to classification and compensation plan. And so in classifying positions, we have a point factor system that we look at common criteria, the same criteria for every position. Things like the knowledge and education needed, the level of experience, the occupational risk, things like that. And we've used that same system as approved by the personnel board back in 2008. We've used the same system, and we evaluate positions as major changes happen, and we'll use that to determine the placement in the range. And so that has been something that the personnel board has tasked me with doing. I worked with management. I don't do it alone. I'm always working with the supervisors or when the consultant that did the last study was in place, we would also use the consultant to look at that. We'd go through and talk about the details. It usually takes, it can take 1 to 2 hours, depending on how many changes, that sort of thing, to go through and classify it. It can be shorter than that, but it's an opportunity to make sure we all understand the position, that sort of thing. So once we have gone through and determined where those points would place it into the salary grades, then I put it together and bring it to the personnel board and make that recommendation. Just a side note that related to the classification and compensation study. GovHR is now doing a study of all of the regular status, non-union positions that are part of the class and comp plan. So that covers about 190 positions, hopefully. And they will be using a similar but different classification manual or evaluation factor. So again, same concepts, and as required by the bylaw that there needs to be a uniform system for grouping the positions. Same concepts, but they've got their own classification manual and point factor system that they're going through and will apply these to develop those grades. So, but it will not necessarily come out the same. Again, this is a little off topic, but just giving you context as we put this off, that a position right now that is grouped together, if we change those uniform factors, they may be grouped very differently a year from now. So what we do now may or may not be the same as what happens in the end. So that's some background. So as you know, we've our newer town manager, Carrie LaFleur, has been coming in and she's been looking at what her needs are and what the operations needs are relative to positions. And the first position here on this is an economic vitality manager. That's the title that she has requested. It is a new position that has not existed before, with a new set of duties. And I provided the job description. You can see that it's a long list of duties there. And it's the education experience levels we consider to be equivalent to a bachelor's degree, at least 5 years of experience. We've listed the knowledge, skills, and abilities. And in classifying this, we found that it fit solidly in the MP4 range based on what her expectation of what the position would be doing right now. It's very possible that, in time, if it develops into something more, or as we look at it in a new classification plan, it could be, at a different point, but that it fit comfortably in there based on, the procedure that I just described.
Well, I was curious, do you also consider sort of market research, looking at similar positions in other towns to get a sense of where that fits on the scale, or is it just based on that point system that you use?
So there's a bit of a combination. So we don't do that for every single position because it's a combination of market and internal equity and factors. So we build scales that are meant to say that, these commonly grouped positions should fit in this range to maintain internal equity. If one position out of 10 in that really has some other market, that doesn't mean that we necessarily can provide that within our system. We may or may not be able to, but we look at that. That's part of the reason why we did take some types of positions out, if we can justify that within the equal pay law, that sort of thing. So we do keep that in mind. In this particular case, because of where we are at with the class and comp study, it didn't seem like it makes sense because we don't know where the range is. We feel comfortable, we have a general idea, but yes, we can work within this range as well as we can with anything in the labor market right now. This seemed reasonable to maintain internal equity, place it there. We'll continue to look at it with the class and comp study. And I don't, at the moment, we haven't included this as a benchmark position in that. I think as it gets solidified, maybe it will become one that we look at regularly.
You have somebody in this position.
We do not. This has never been filled. We did not have anybody. it would be advertised sometime after this process.
Question, Liz, do you have any? Okay.
No,
Okay, the one aspect of the job description. And it's not that my point necessarily has to be included in the job description, but. What I find interesting is there's not much, I mean, I don't know how the town would know whether somebody has done a good job or not. There's, there's develops, there's recommends, there's work, there's research, there's meetings, but there, what I think is, in my mind, this thing is there's no quantifiable objectives. Or maybe that's to be determined, but I don't see how a job that I believe is going to cost a fair amount to find the right person, how we should leave it being so subjective. So I would be happier if there was some, and maybe there has been, and I just, and I'm calling upon you, Amy, to elaborate, but that seems to be such a vital missing point to this job. I mean, I don't know if I was in that job, how would I know I was, what the expectations were? How would I know if I was doing a good job? How would the town know if they have benefited from the person in this job? So how does that resonate with the town, with you?
Well, in terms of how would I would expect that, what should be happening is that there would be meetings with the manager that supervises this person, and that they work out and they have goals and understandings of what needs to be accomplished, and that's part of the performance evaluation plan. The performance evaluation plan has not been fully utilized in the last few years. It's been a challenge to get supervisors to be able to do that. And we, particularly through the last few years, and COVID didn't tie pay performance, and so people didn't see it the same way. There is some type of pay of performance, but not at the level that we had. So Bill, I think that this is a definite area for improvement, and part of the discussion, what I would propose is that it be part of the discussion in the class and comp study. So one of the things that we need to do is happening is gathering the data for job descriptions, making sure that we determine what needs to be in a job description. What's going to be the format for it? Is that the place? Is this the document where we're going to include this? This is something that summarizes it to support the classification, as the bylaw requires that we have a summary job description for that. Is this tool adequately meeting that need? Are there other needs, like we looked at things that we send out to medical providers for ADA, that sort of thing? And then what part do we need in performance evaluation? So I think we should be having that discussion as part of the study to say, okay, how are we going to handle job descriptions going forward? I think that part of the plans here that we need to talk about are what are we going to do for a performance evaluation plan and policy, and how people move through the ranges. So I don't have that answer for you as something for this description, I guess is what I'm saying, but I hear you and think that that's part of what we need to be working on.
I asked another question. So in most of the job descriptions I've seen, there's not really a section for sort of measures of success for a position.
Yeah.
And so I've not generally seen them in job descriptions. So it's kind of an interesting, point that you're making, that it is lacking, but I think that's kind of, in my experience, that's been kind of across the board for all job descriptions. It says here's the list of tasks that you need to get done, but it doesn't really say how do we measure success at the end of that. So
Certainly what I've seen in the municipal world.
yeah.
Right. I am, yeah.
I do have to say that this is very typical of job descriptions in the areas that I worked in. However, they do report to the town manager. Usually there's this certainly a 2 to 3 month review where they go over everything. And usually in their performance, they would know what they would be in their yearly or how often it's done. It would have the stuff that's in here that they expect to have done. That would be documented for that time, but it wouldn't be a surprise because meanwhile, they're going to be meeting and going over the goals and stuff. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I'm assuming that a lot of what I said is being done. You know what I mean? In order, because this is a huge job description. So I understand that. I just would think that there would be things that went along that's being done that would be able to make sure that the person is doing their job.
Yeah, typing away, so I'm trying to swing back because I don't have everything printed. So I agree with the comments from Bill and Nancy. I think this is there's a lot of essential job functions. I don't, in the general summary, it feels a bit counterintuitive. Now, I'm new to town, but we at town meeting last year, there was or earlier this year, there was a long discussion of how many businesses do we want in town that were what does it call? Formula businesses, right? And it seems like if you run down the essential job functions and also the economic vitality manager, the idea is growth, but we are a town that says we want certain growth. And so how does this individual then, balance those things? I don't see that that's clearly defined in the general summary. So the second paragraph, the economic vitality manager is responsible for maintaining and improving upon the efficiency and effectiveness of all areas under their direction and control. I don't know what's under their direction and control, so I'd like to know more about that. So I would say that I'd really, like to have some revision, some clarity, more clarity around how this is written first, and then and that gets to, I think, why you're struggling to find like what is the real driver of this role. Is that for me the general summary is more general than summary, and that makes it very difficult given it's not in the context of what the town expectations are. And my understanding is the town isn't looking for unfettered growth in the business communities. If efficiency and effectiveness is that we have businesses or business buildings that are left empty, and that's a situation, then maybe that's a short-term role too, or maybe it's, I don't know how that fits in, but I don't see it precise enough for me to understand what the role is going to do and how it fits in with the sort of way the town has been structured so far. Okay. Yeah, so it's a little bit of a different comment than saying, what are the goals of this job for the individual? But it's saying, how does this position overall fit in with the management of the town? So it's a sort of the same question, but raised to a structural level. Does that make sense?
I think so. I mean, in the sourcing for this job, is this what you use, or is there a separate advertisement? Does somebody prepare a separate paragraph of? Because if I'm a person looking at a job, economic vitality manager, I mean, first of all, I'm not sure if I know what that means, but that's the best we come up with. But what can the person? What are the expectations, and what does the person have to know in order to feel comfortable that he or she is going to be successful? So, and maybe this isn't the right place. On the other hand, that we've had the study task force sort of encourage us to broaden our wings, so to speak, and take a look at what we've done in the past, and then to sort of, is this a topic of including something or a separate document or whatever as to what's expected of the person in this job? How does the person know whether he or she's been successful? And what are the priorities? And I hear that that's typically done in the performance review or goal setting. But, all of a sudden it gets really wishy-washy because we don't see, and I don't know if we would even be entitled to see what the goals are of a particular job. And then another element that enters into my mind is town manager has approved this. This is what the town manager wants. And in this case, we have to accept the fact that she has gone through considerable amount of effort to articulate what's all involved in the job. And therefore, I don't know if we have any, I don't know what our influence can be at all, other than, making it clear that this was a concern of ours, of whether this has to be changed, because this is, we're not sitting in the town manager's position.
Right.
It's not our job to come up with a perfect job description, in my opinion. But we certainly can voice our concerns about what in fact is absent. And the answer so far is that in the goal setting process, when somebody comes on board, that's when this gets clarified. But again, if I'm a person applying for this job, I think I might like to know, what do you expect me to do? So
Well, I was just thinking that one of the things that I've always struggled with job descriptions is keeping them generic enough that you can sort of attract a broad reach of individuals, while also trying to put enough specifics in there so it makes sense and you're actually advertising what the job's going to look like and what the skills you're looking for. And so I'm wondering if maybe a little bit of more specificity in the general summary in terms of like goals and specific like projects or something like that they're looking for. But I mean, I get the challenge in juggling those two pieces for job descriptions. So.
Yeah, so just a couple things. It's a really good discussion, and I think it's helpful to think about again as we go forward with job descriptions. The approach to job descriptions that we have now is based on the template that was worked on with the consultants and the personnel board, obviously years ago, right? So because in 2008, and then the consultant had remained involved for quite a number of years after working with us, but that's where some of this language, just so you know, that second paragraph, that's language that you're going to see in pretty much all of our job descriptions, and it's standard language. That's what was, for better or worse, that's what was established. The job descriptions in this context are going back to the personnel bylaw. And the personnel bylaw says that that we need to have, again, the classification plan for the uniform system for grouping positions. But it also says that, sorry, I lost it. Descriptions shall consist of a statement describing the essential nature and level of the work performed by employees in that classification, illustrative examples of typical tasks and duties assigned, and the required or desirable qualifications for the classification.
Mm-hmm. And could you just, where's the quote from, what page?
Yeah, sure. That is section 5.2 of the personnel bylaw, which is on page 4. And so that's the basis for this particular document. Sometimes we would have a job description that could apply to several positions, perhaps an administrative assistant or custodians in different departments that may have some different goals or performance measures related to that. So this is about the classification piece. There's also going to how do we advertise the positions. We do use this as part of the tool, that you will find those on our postings. But we also do write an ad or other marketing type materials. Of various types as we go, what we might say about the position. That might comment on what an area of focus will be. Although that can change quite a bit, you know, over time. So what's hot right now may not be what's hot a year from now. So we may not put that in the ad, but there are other tools that we use to communicate that. And again, the performance evaluation or discussions with the manager, you know, or that we, you know, as a supervisor, you know, depending on the type of the job and the type of the work, they're going to be sitting down and working with them to figure out what the priorities are.
All right. And I was gonna ask too, when you're going through the class and comp, you're probably gonna be looking at, I would assume, job descriptions as well, so you'll be able to tell us. I mean, this has been kind of a formula that we've been doing since I've been on since 2014. And so, I mean, they are pretty full of a lot of stuff that, you know, I would be overwhelmed if I was reading that. But I do feel like that at this particular point, it would be a, you know, something to really look at, but they're all like this at the moment. So I think changing them till we can get a better format is going to be hard, but it would be nice to know that we're going to look at that.
Well, I agree. I mean, I appreciate Amy's
Yeah.
focus on, you know, what is the standard now
Right.
today. I think this is an area that when we, as a personnel board, start looking more specifically at what changes to the personnel bylaw, we may decide, you know, it's not a bad idea to have some expectations, even if, you know, even setting them on a quantitative basis might actually be helpful for the citizens to know that their taxpayer money is going for something that actually makes sense and that someone's evaluating that. The only other comment that I guess I would have is that it would be possible to revise maybe that second paragraph or whatever, and simply state something like, initially, the focus will be to whatever. That is, you provide a little bit of clarity to initially how the person should be, you know, what is the focus. That might be a way to augment the existing, it still keeps the same job description format template, but it allows for a little bit more clarity in terms of expectation initially.
I would suggest that that might be used for a advertisement or communication, but this is the official document that is incorporated, you know, in the town records as part of what was adopted to match the bylaw requirements. So to make edits and to do that sort of thing means now you have yet another record that lives on. So I would just suggest there are other ways to do it than to have it officially in this document.
I have another, sorry, are you gonna, you're following up on that point or? Okay, so Liz, talking to those on the phone. So one thing, Bill, I wanted to go back to a point you made earlier, and that is about we're not here to write the perfect job description. Totally agree with that. And also that it's really the town manager is deciding to have this position. My understanding from, and maybe I'm getting ahead of us with the personnel study task force, is that what I don't understand is where this fits in the strategy of the town manager about the town personnel. So why is this position required now? To me, is part of the role that the personnel board would be as, you know, kind of, let's say, I'll use the term thought leaders to help the town manager with the strategic intent of the town's future, right, with the employees. So I don't have that context, and that makes me also get down, and we've gotten down into the weeds now about, you know, comments about the description, but I don't know what the context is, right? So that's why I said, for a town meeting, when they said the formula businesses, not really, it was voted down to increase more than, I think it was 10 or 12. So if that's the case, then where does that fit in the strategy? And that's the context that I was assuming the personnel board was partnering with the town manager in terms of that future and the structure of the non-unionized employees.
Well, that's an interesting point. I think one of the problems or one of the issues is, we're actually venturing into sort of new territory.
Yeah.
And this isn't typically at all been the process in the past. It doesn't mean that it shouldn't be, but I think and I wonder really, I don't know if I totally agree, Liz, with you in terms of the role of personnel board. The town manager is hired by the select board. The select board is responsible for the performance review of town managers. So if there's a lot of latitude there, obviously, the town manager though can help or can indicate what she wants to have as the organization to support her to be successful. So we're not in we don't go ahead and make judgments on that of how she's doing her job. That's really the select board's case. So I don't know, I don't feel that necessarily delving into the strategy right now is a requirement, but I do think based on the personnel study task force, maybe we encourage more dialogue between, which is clearly recommended in the task force, more dialogue between personnel board and the town manager, so that we actually understand exactly the answer to the points you're making.
Yeah, I mean, there's, for me, you can look at that from one or another side, right? It's not, I certainly am not thinking that we are judging the performance of the town manager. I agree with you completely. The select board does that. That's the role of the select board, right? But in my sense, look around this table, you have some wonderful experience here in HR issues, right? And really, as a thought partner to support, does this actually get the right person so that your goals can be met, is more of a facilitation, a partnership, rather than a watching to judge. I'm certainly not putting us in that position, but I do look at, we've got a new person, Kate Ryan, who has a lot of terrific experience as well. So everybody here has a balance of experiences and knowledge about HR issues that really can support that the town does the right thing and the town manager's strategy is met, right? But we need to know what that strategy is in order to do that. And that's where I think it's much more of a partnership and certainly not a judgment position, but the experience can facilitate that. That's where I see it as more that facilitation role. I'll put that in later to the minutes. Okay,
I think the question then on the table is, are we comfortable based on the current personnel bylaw and sort of the history that this job description meets the standard? Not that it's perfect, not that it couldn't be better, not that it's, grammatically, whatever, but does it meet what we and the personnel board, at least, now and historically, not necessarily going forward, because I think there's really a lot we can do here.
Yeah.
Incorporating the points, Liz, that you just made, and really do our best to increase the level of professionalism and the level of communication and so forth that has been identified as an issue. And we can be very active, I think, in facilitating some of that. So where are we at, Amy, in terms of this position? You're looking for us to To do what now?
The recommendation is that you, there is a proposed motion there. It would be to add the title of Economic Vitality Manager to grade MP4 of the class and comp plan effective November 9th, 2022. The board doesn't vote on the job description. Of course, it's the grade and the title.
I'm happy to make that motion, because I'm comfortable with, as the job description is now. I think, I do feel that we will be reviewing and looking at what you can come up with your program. So I would like to make a motion that we move to add the title Economic Vitality Manager to grade MP4 of the classification and comp plan effective 11/9/22.
Ready to do a second?
Second.
All right. Thank you. So we'll go around the table in terms of all in favor. Nancy? Liz?
Not in favor.
And
Aye.
aye. And I will go ahead with, at least for now, that I will say aye, only because that this is what this is the standard, right? What we do. But I really, I want to make certain those reflect how and where we can make significant improvements in this whole area. All right, so we will move on to the community, and so it is 3-1, so it's passed, and we move on to the next one, which is the communications manager.
So, this is a rework of a position that is currently on the classification and compensation plan, which is the public information and communications manager. That position is not going to be filled in the same way. The position that exists, that is in the higher grade, I guess, but had Minuteman media responsibility. So you may recall that not that long ago, there was a restructure of responsibility, and the chief technology officer is now leading the Minuteman media operation instead of this public information related position. So those elements of the job responsibilities have been removed, and instead there's more of a focus on internal communication. Carrie LaFleur really like to have that be something that we're now proposing it be the title communications manager, really focused on not just public information, but also internally, and really helping to build those channels that we've been talking about. So again, we made those types of updates to the description, went through the classification exercise, and recommend that it be in an MP3 grade.
What was it before?
Was it?
Was it more and you took away the media and now it's dropped down a bit?
Yeah, it was a 4 before.
Okay.
And prior to that, it was just PIO, it was a 2.
Right. Originally, there was another version of it too, several years ago.
And it's not filled, but the intent is you will fill it.
Right.
Has it been empty for a while?
Well, it's been evolving. It's been evolving. So Aaron Stevens was the employee that filled that position. Aaron officially moved over to a position in planning, rather than transportation planner, staff planner position. She's been assisting with these types of duties as well as additional duties. We've also got Donna McIntosh, who's in the town manager's office, who has been doing some of these, but so some of these duties in the meantime as additional duties. A combination while Carrie was evaluating when she thought the answer would be for how to structure it going forward.
Any other questions? The only one that comes to my mind, and it actually probably certainly I could have made it in the previous one as well, is the task force was quite specific on what information or the lack of information that we, the personnel board, had as it related to salary grade. So I'm not sure at this point necessarily, I'm not sure how to integrate that point into our process, because I don't think we are qualified to, we don't have the data in order to question, should it be MP3, 2, 1, or 12? So this is, I hear task force and the concern, but I don't see, at least at presently, how we can incorporate that point into the existing process that we're using. So all I guess is requested is we just make a note, well, perhaps my comment, and it gets, we can talk about it if you want right now, or you can share your thoughts on whether or not this is something relevant either now or for the future. I don't think it's relevant now.
No, I don't either. And I also have to say that the task force had a lot of recommendations, but I don't know if we'll be able, if we're gonna get to all of them. And I don't know if we would even be able to do some of them. And it's a long process.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I do feel that I would not know, but obviously if they were doing the media, which was a huge issue, and they were 4 and they dropped to 3 because they don't have that any longer and more internal stuff. To me, it makes sense.
logical.
It makes
Yeah,
very
it's logical.
logical. So,
All right.
I have one question, and it has to do with the listed essential job function. So first I should preface by, I agree with what Nancy just stated, that without Minuteman Media, it seems reasonable that it's going in a lower positioning. And I agree with Bill that we might not really have the information we need to make that clear with confidence, that decision, but that's where the personnel board has been situated in the town decision-making at this time. Okay, so I agree with those things. I just wanted to note that manages, edits, promotes, and maintains content for the town's official social media and outreach account. I wanted to just clarify, that includes the town website, for example? Yes,
Yeah.
that is far behind. So I think it would be fantastic, but those are very hard skills, right? To maintain and update the background of a website so that it's really up to date. And ours isn't, so that's a big job. And I just wanted to understand, I don't know how to find a person. I'm certainly not that kind of person, so I don't know how to find those skills, but those skills are serious skills, right? To be able to maintain a website. And I'm assuming that would be a big part of the role here. And just wanted to flag that, because MP3, in my mind, it's somebody way up in the clouds who can maintain a website. So I understand that they're not going to handle Minuteman Media, which I do think is also daunting. But MP3 is recognized as able to maintain a website. Is that where you
Right,
guys?
well, I don't know necessarily what you have in mind when you think of maintaining a website, so that might be something for discussion, but yes, this person is responsible for that website.
Okay.
There are different levels of what that means. There are people throughout town that work on the website. There is a vendor that's involved with the website, so.
So they would maintain the vendor too, then, is that this role?
We're looking for a point person. Someone, instead of saying, oh, well, nobody updates the website, so we're just gonna dish it over to whoever. We want some more accountability.
Yeah.
We want some centralization. We'd like some training so that we have one person maybe coordinating with all the administrators to make sure that it gets updated on a regular basis. In terms of the salary rate, this title will be considered by our GovHR. It was as someone who helped to compile the information to make the revisions, I can tell you that the salaries we looked at were comparable with the limited titles that we did look at. But just to be sure, we included this title with the GovHR list, and they will be reviewing it just as they will all the other titles. And the other measure for that, though, too, isn't just the, the job descriptions we found online or the salaries. It was given the point factor system to make sure it was in line. So there's a few different ways you can look at salary market. But I think on this position, I think I feel very solid that we're in a good position to establish this job description at that rate. And if there needs to be any tweaks, that's certainly something that the consultant can assist us with in terms of rating the importance of website hard skills in relation to, being someone. I mean, a lot of these roles, you'll see the term manager. What we're looking for is this is sort of the new wave of really the workforce. We're looking for ways to get out of our silos, which is traditionally clerk, typist, administrator, or clerk. We're looking for ways to take the topics, the issues, such as communication or economic development or vitality. And what the manager is attempting to do is to create sort of an umbrella over all of those silos to make sure that we're connecting all of the dots. So for communications, it can be external, which is usually the traditional focus, but we're looking at the internal focus of communications. Different peer groups, talking with other peer groups, making sure that we've got the right connections through the organization to make sure we're not just dealing with silos in every department. So that's what these positions are really an attempt to do, is to look into the knowledge work as opposed to the traditional way of considering these jobs and the titles. So that just is sort of a taste of where we were going with this, both of the titles actually that we're talking about. If I answer, I'm not sure if I answered.
No, that's very helpful. And I think that breaking down silos is really an important, in the way that you framed it, I like very much. I used a term when I was writing to try to quickly keep up with your speech. And I said overlapping skills, for example, communication, where they're connecting through the organization. Would you accept overlapping skills?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
From my only contribution is going to be this is not the person who you're going to get a new website.
Right.
You're going to have to outsource that.
Yeah.
You have to outsource that. You're going to have to spend probably a fair amount of money. This person, this person has those skills, they're working for a vendor. They're working for an outside. What we want, I think, in the way I think about this job, it's a program manager. You want somebody who can manage all of the pieces and make certain that as few things slip through the cracks, and that there's a requirement for interfacing and a requirement for coordination. But this isn't a coder. This isn't somebody who's built even, well, maybe, but not likely been heavily involved in developing a website. Anyway, that's my take on this job.
Yeah.
All right, so we need a motion, I think, to add this title, communications manager. I'm going to call on you again, Nancy.
Okay, we have to do that. So let me just get my back page here. So I would move to add the title communication manager to grade MP3 of the classification and compensation plan effective 11/9/2022.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
All right, second. All those in favor? Kate?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Liz?
Aye.
And Bill? Aye. All right. That has passed unanimously. We now go on to the next job, which is senior administrative assistant.
So this is a restructure of a position at the library that hasn't been in place for a number of years as an employee. We've used a contracted service to fill part of this role. So we will be in the future looking to fill the administrative support role in the library with an employee again. And so this is a step to do that. we already have the title of senior administrative assistant on the classroom comp plan, so we don't need to ask that a title be added. And that means that this particular one also wouldn't end up in a town meeting action. It would just be something that the personnel is allocating it. The bylaw talks about that when there is a position that's being created, we look at the scope of the duties, we use a uniform system and then allocate it. So going through that process, we felt given the financial skills, the computer skills, the complications of the payroll, that sort of thing in this position, it did reach the level of senior administrative assistant versus perhaps an administrative assistant, that sort of thing. So we have recommended that it be placed again at that title in the AC5 grade.
So for my benefit, are all senior administrative assistants who hold that title in the town, are all those AC5s?
All are AC5s, yes. So
No exception.
right, so there is a classification title of administrative assistant that is in the AC4 grade,
Okay.
and department clerk that's in the, yes.
Well, in my mind, it seems it'd be important to be consistent, so sort of a no-brainer.
Why was it, evidently it's been around, and was it because of COVID and not being able to hire somebody?
No, it's been, it was contracted out a long time ago. It used to be a combination of a circulation assistant. It isn't a full-time senior admin, and there was a decision by the last library director and town manager for a number of years to keep it as a contracted position, to leave options open for how it would be structured.
Oh,
Do you have internal candidates for this job, or do you don't even know?
I think that there is certainly a possibility, and all internal candidates are welcome to apply.
All right, I think unless anyone else has a question, we should move on to a motion to allocate the library administrative support position to the existing senior administrative assistant. So I need someone to make a motion.
Okay, I can make a motion. I move to allocate the library administrative support position to the existing senior administrative assistant title in grade AC5 effective 11/9/2022.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second
All
that.
right, thank you, Nancy, for seconding it. All in favor, we'll go start with. okay?
Aye.
Aye, and then.
Aye.
Aye, and Bill Mirage back up. All right, so that is, we've taken care of this agenda item. I guess the question is, are we having fun yet? Add, interject a little here. So we're now going to move on to the fourth item, which is a discussion of the Personnel Study Task Force report and recommendations. And based on a email I got from Amy late this afternoon, the select board would like us to present on the 28th of November. Not next Monday, but the 28th. So new news, hot off the press, and therefore our discussion. And I don't see any reason not to have our discussion tonight. What I had asked for and Amy has put together was sort of the thoughts that each of us might have from having read, reviewed, studied this document, and what are our thoughts in terms of what we would like to present to the select board. So I have questions that I've taken from Nancy's input and from Liz's here. And then so I have my own points, which are also expressed on the in the document. So anybody like to start with in this case, Nancy or Liz, in terms of your thoughts, especially as you've written them down?
Okay, so had several things. I mean, seriously, it's a huge amount of information in this study. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that they did it in a year, to be honest with you. There's so much information. But for me, the one thing I see throughout is communication. I just feel communication is the key to many, many things. And I had put down communication, I put down leadership, I put down support of the employees, transparencies, and the class and comp review. So we know that the class and comp review is going on, which I'm delighted that it is at this particular time. So hopefully we'll have a fair amount of answers from that. And the communication, I felt like that we just somehow there needed to be more interaction with employees. The negativity that seems to permeate is really not doing much for the town or committees or anything. So we need to make sure that they're not feeling left out. They are appreciated. Their work environment, they feel is stressful, so it'd be nice to try to help them not feel like that. I feel like they're also not given I don't feel like they're given enough information sometimes, and so maybe that's where sometimes things break down. And I think they need positive reinforcement from their management. And you know, I guess the reason all of this sort of made more sense to me is when we had that meeting in the summertime in the open area of the lake plant. And I really expected that the employees would be able to really talk and be able to say how they were feeling. And that really didn't happen. There were a couple of them spoke, and they really didn't say very much. So obviously, I don't feel that they feel that they can, you know, or so that's where I was really coming from. I think that the personnel board, our policies, procedures, and that we do need to look at most definitely and change some of the things. So that's kind of my synopsis.
I'm going to ask some specific questions here. I was curious, and you know, obviously this is off the cuff, so you haven't heard any of these questions before, but I'm curious what examples employees need to be aware of the issues with the town and their own departments. Could we delve down one level, and what are you thinking about?
I was thinking mainly the most important one was the 5 that came before us, not understanding exactly why they were passed over. I mean, that was pretty significant. And also I think that I'm not sure that all the negativity is true negativity, or if it isn't just a few things that happen and then it passes on and it you know, sort of permeates through things. So I felt like that was, if we had more transparency with the managers and stuff that came from the town, that may make a difference.
Okay. I have the same sort of question regarding examples as it regards to leadership. The employees need positive reinforcement within the workplace in order to move forward in their job. Can you elaborate a little on that sentence?
Well, it seems that from them not speaking at the meeting, and then for the ones that were here with some of the complaints, that, and also, I mean, all you had to do was look through your task force to see the comments and the negativity throughout that huge area of stuff that was redacted, that you could tell that they really did not have positive reinforcement. Okay. And I think that's so important in any employment, any job that you have. You need to feel wanted, you need to feel like you're making a difference, and you need to feel like you've done a good job. Of course, if you haven't, then you're told Okay,
Mhm.
so I felt like that they do need that, it needs to come from the top,
Okay,
so.
that's an excellent point. I'm going to ask the same question in regards to the communication is critical. My question is going to be, what are your thoughts on how to accomplish this? Which is, we need to start with encouraging employees to go to HR department when working with their manager fails. Any thoughts on how that gets accomplished?
Well, I had tried to ask Amy to make sure that people do go to the HR department, and I guess people do. And I think that, but sometimes, there's some things that depending upon the person that can't be worked out or they're not happy with it. And I did ask if there was any mediator or somebody that they could go to, he's obviously besides us. And we talked about an ombudsman. And I know that we do have that certainly in healthcare and assisted living and all that I've been in. There's always been somebody that is known as the ombudsman, and you can set them up to talk, and it makes a huge difference. So I just feel like that they need to be able to express themselves and get some answers.
Okay. The last sentence, or next to last, we should monthly updates from the HR department and increase our annual meeting with employees to a biannual or more if necessary. So
There's an annual meeting, so I'm thinking that at least it would be nice if they had a biannual meeting, so twice a year they would be meeting. And also, whether there were updates from the, from the department, whether it would talk about new employees and who's going in. I don't know what is sent out, if they are aware of, some things that were done for the town, or an employee that, had done a great job, was he mentioned in some sort of a, like, I'm thinking of a newsletter or something like that.
okay.
But just something more for them to hear. Positive reinforcement, communication, transparency, just kind of know what you have, and so therefore those were my thoughts.
I think there's no necessary, unless Amy, you have any comments, but what we're trying to do here is to sort of solidify a little, perhaps, the points we want to make before the select board. I'm trying to help sort of encourage some examples so that you may want to modify or whatever.
Right.
And then my approach to this is a little different, as you saw, but I think it all fits nicely into what we're trying to do as a team here.
Right.
Liz, do you want to talk about your comments here?
Sure, and I guess the first thing I'd say is, I agree with Nancy, there's a lot, look at this, a very thick book. Now, some of this isn't new material, but some is new material, right? And I too, I agree with your comments about communication is a key theme. And that more communication, so for just that reason, to have happier employees that are more satisfied and feel confident that they know how they'll be judged, and that they have, an understanding therefore of the actions that will be well received. That's part of it. And I love the idea of an ombudsman. I think those work very well. And so I definitely support the comments that Nancy had made. And bringing up my own comments here. Do you want me to summarize them, Bill, or do you want to do?
I think that obviously we can all agree that. So
Yeah.
but I thought if there was any need to emphasize anything, I've got some questions.
Yeah.
And
Well,
maybe that's the way we should just, because that will probably amplify.
Yeah.
And
I guess if I wanted to emphasize anything, it would be two things. I did start with a thank you to the personnel task force, because I do think they did a yeoman's job in a short amount of time, right? And obviously we're all on the same page in terms of trying to move this forward and make sure that the town is has all the right institutions, commissions or whatever, committees in place to really help the town. So I'm all in on that. I think communication, again, I second that as a key factor. And I'd add to that the structure of meetings. So earlier I said no to a recommendation for a brand new position. And really behind that was because I don't know what the strategy is. And I think that that connection between the personnel board and the town management is part of that structure of communication that needs to be more clear and regularly utilized, so that the role that we have is integrated into the movement of town resources and the utilization of those resources. That's where I stopped. Now I'm ready for.
So I'm trying to, in that for number one, there's urgency to update these materials. I just want to make certain that if you could just elaborate which materials. I have my sense of what that means, but what are you thinking of when you use the word update these materials?
So in the prior sentence, the procedures and policies that guide the work of the personnel board. They require updating. That was one of the recommendations. And I think that once these materials are updated, that'll be helpful and more transparent for employees.
Does
So-
that mean the bylaws? I just want to be clear. Is that what you meant by the bylaws?
Yeah, there's a list in the policies and procedures in the recommendations of which specific and bylaws is part of it that should be updated. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Yeah.
I mean, to look at the bylaws, definitely, because I think, well, when were they last done? 2000 and.
Yeah. So it's
a long time ago. But, and the policies and procedure, I think you need to do the bylaws and then the policies and procedures. Is that the routine way?
Well, the bylaw have had updates throughout the years and it's sections. So if there's a section of the bylaw that needs an updating, then we can do that. We have done that. The last time was 2017.
I was gonna say.
I think
17.
part of the question that I feel like has been sort of out there for a while is what should be in a bylaw versus what should be a policy versus what should be a handbook or a guide. And I really believe we need to define the structure, the policy framework here and roles to be able to make this an effective system that's going to live on. And so knowing, so if we're going to leave things like vacation, sick, personal in the bylaw, then let's make sure that it's written in a way that gets us the framework for then expanding from that in a policy, et cetera. But there's been a mix through the years, and there was an ongoing, and I don't want to go too far, but there was an ongoing thought that more should come out of the bylaw and be moved to policy. Whether it be something as simple as it used to, just my number one example, it used to be a bylaw that said the relationships that you could get bereavement leave for. And it said, mother, father, whatever. And it said grandparent. And it didn't say grandchild. And that was a bylaw. And nobody thought that somebody's grandchild was going to, they passed it away. And so we couldn't grant bereavement leave. It's a law. And so the questions go back to what should be, in the bylaw. Bylaw is what town meeting approves, what needs to be approved by town meeting, what are the protections of the bylaw, why are they there versus policy, who approves the policy, that sort of thing. So I don't know, they all have been updated in some form, and some of the confusion is that pieces are in different places. And it's hard to bring all that together. We have ideas on how to do that, even within the existing bylaw. We've been spending a lot of hours on this. We didn't know. We thought we were perhaps going a different direction 2 years ago. But since that didn't happen, we've really been working with what we have. But I would personally find it very, very helpful to have that policy framework and roles of authorities clearly defined so that we can make this structure that's going to live on.
And we may need your contribution to helping to lay out sort of the landscape and what the road looks like to do that. I think, as I understand the bylaw, any change at all, period, any changes has to go before the town meeting. So that's different than the policies and procedures, and it's also different than the personnel charge. That is that's another entity, another item that is on the table in terms of what needs to be updated or revised. I'm going to keep going because I do have with Liz. I just maybe like Liz for you to just elaborate a little on the number 2 last sentence. The personnel board needs to be better informed of the data and rationale before making decisions and recommendations that affect employees. So you made a really good point about strategy and how it affected that new job. What other things are you thinking about when you wrote that sentence?
Well, that was a good example of what we had earlier tonight in the discussion, right?
Mhm.
That without understanding why or how this new position would fit in, I'm not comfortable recommending on it.
Mhm.
And that would be one example. Some other examples, so we're looking right now at this issue with the 5 employees, and I made a request for more data in that situation as well. Right. That's and a third one would be, for example, we all are worried that we have a lot of empty positions in the town. But I'd love to have more data to understand that more clearly, right? Like, where are the positions? How, what is there's 350. So it's reasonable that we could analyze data about 350 people pretty clearly about, this category is hard to fill, getting at more information about where are we looking, how does that, and helping to, facilitate with resources and, understanding of where those skills might be trained, for example, or, there's that sort of information I think that could be really helpful for us to make more, recommendations, because really that's what we're doing, right? Recommendations that have some weight, because we have more of an understanding of where the balance of those employees or the empty positions are, for example. So, a living document that we say, okay, let's go look at it again. How are we doing? Do we have a category of, problem areas that we can identify and then do something, make some recommendations, some suggestions even to support town manager and others dealing with those positions. So those 3 examples.
Okay, great. And I think I'm going to say that you've included, I was going to ask about requires the best assess the problem. The personnel board requires more systematic reporting. So from the town manager and HR department.
Yeah.
We should. So you've essentially
Yeah, that's
examples of
right.
what's included
Yeah.
there. All right. My input, which is obviously you have and the citizens have, is that in my mind, what was most important to me was the points here that are listed, A, B, C, and D on my input. I thought that I would comment on the overall, what I felt was the overall quality of the personnel task force. I thought, second of all, I would note some areas of disagreement with facts and conclusions. And the third thing is, I really think this employee survey was, I don't think we need to have another occurrence, whether it's employees or citizens, whereby negative things, and in my opinion, unnecessary. So I think in order to do that, in order to sort of a lesson learned, I think we need a greater understanding of the do's and don'ts if this is ever done again. Again, this is just my opinion. So the first priority that I had is establish a plan. And how to determine the priority of tasks to complete. Who makes this determination? Is it the select board? Is it the select board with input such as the town manager, personnel board, personnel task force, or citizens? Again, I'm talking about establish a plan. And then we need a structure to set a baseline. So who does this structure? And understand resources required to execute a plan and identify present limitations. So as I was sitting in Oaxaca, Mexico, I had my phone out and I was learning how to use Excel on the phone. So it actually came out better than I thought. So I created this, and there was some mezcal around that I had to reach the, so to speak,
This is your first time doing
on the phone. I mean, on the phone. Well, thank you.
it? I've even done that on the computer, so.
So I decided that I wanted to take the task force executive report and try to identify what I call major items. So that's the first column. Then the second column was my intent, I use the word elements, was to, what are we talking about? What are items, what are organizations, people, whatever that need to be included in this communication piece. And then what I did is I came up with a column called cited deficiencies. Now, these were deficiencies that in my opinion, I got from the task force's executive summary. So I don't want to suggest that any of this is perfect, but I really thought this was a good start. Because I wanted to be able to have a way, how we move forward. How are we ever going to take a document that was prepared and move forward? So then I said to myself, okay, it may be relevant to sort of have a column called actual situation. And what I mean by that is that the town's position on a cited deficiency. From my knowledge, I think there is a difference of opinion on certain of these cited deficiencies. And again, this is just my input, my draft for the personnel board to consider as a tool. That's all it is. It's a tool. And then I had a column called end goal. So if we're going to deal with the cited deficiencies, what is the end goal? We need to articulate what that is. And then the last column is, okay, we got a lot of items here. How are we going to decide what to tackle first? What's the priority? So I came up with this scheme of high, moderate, and low. And I defined high as to be completed in the next 6 months and so forth. Moderate to be completed in the next 6 to 12 and low to be completed in the next 12 to 24 months. Again, those numbers, if this concept makes sense, then obviously we can change any of the numbers. So I think it's important, at least tonight, to gain some kind of understanding as to whether or not this is a helpful tool to move us forward. And I don't suggest that this is the best or the most. I mean, I really wanted to have a starting point. So I'm sort of open for comments now in terms of how you feel about this, how you feel about various columns, and does this help? Because there's no reason to have something that doesn't help. Makes no sense.
I think it's actually very logically laid out and helpful to sort of map out, because there's a lot of information and a lot of findings and recommendations in this report. And I found that there was overlapping recommendations and some that I actually found kind of problematic from an HR standpoint in terms of privacy and personnel issues and disclosure. And so I think trying to prioritize what, how we should move forward and what are the key pieces coming out of this to start on first, I think makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay.
Right, I definitely feel we need to prioritize because there's so much going on that, you can't just go in every direction, so you need to have a plan. So I do agree with that.
Yeah, same. I think that, I'm not sure, Kate, I understand, your comment about privacy, so I'd love to hear more about that. But, in terms of how to bring forward what actions then would happen, this is really a helpful rubric to do that. So, sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a sense that at least this is, for the moment,
Right.
makes some sense. So the question though, sort of, though, I mean, it's ours and the select board and whomever, but the major items, I decided, based on what I read, that I would say communication, governance, the personnel board role, HR, employee relations, and comp and benefits. Now, and that we don't have to cast this in concrete tonight, but and there may be better wordsmithing language and so forth, but that's how I interpreted what in my own mind, what were the major items that we needed to, that I needed to use to categorize the deficiencies.
So one thing I'd like to, so one of the main points that I made is that the structural connections, right? And where would you see that fitting? Because I can see it nuanced a little bit in these, like, but under governance, it's only looking at, right, the policies and procedures kind of stuff, right? It's not looking at, more concretely meetings with town manager, meetings with,
My intent, and that's a good point, my intent was to have that in communications.
Well, doesn't that also fall under role? I mean, isn't part of the strategy, like trying to figure out how the role of the personnel board in strategy, should we be involved in strategy on the town side and in understanding that and our role, so.
I think what I'd like to request, I think we need to keep discussing just a little, is that each of you, provide some edits, whatever, additions, deletions, whatever. Because I think Kate's actually raised an excellent point here. We're still, if I'm back to my first priority, which is establish a plan. So, I think we need input from the select board. I think we need input from the town manager and from Amy, the personnel board, personnel task force, if necessary, citizens, as to whether or not these major items make sense, or whether or not people have opinions. And I'm sure people have opinions. And then the next point I had was, secondly, set the goals. What is the end goal? And what are the milestones, including timelines? Who sets the goals, milestones? The select board with input from town manager, personnel board, task force, citizens. So, this isn't our total purview. I think we need, and I'm soliciting that the contribution and participation of additional parties, organizations, and citizens. Now, I think it might be nice to understand what the present limitations are in setting timelines. And also maybe perhaps a question about resources. And then D is who manages the tasks. Is it the select board, or does the select board delegate? So I think these are, that A, B, C, and D are all relevant for us when we present to the select board to have this as a part of our discussion.
I wanted to just ask a clarifying question about the presentation on the 28th to the select board. Are we basically reviewing the personnel study task force, their recommendations, their findings, and then compiling what we feel are the sort of top places that we think the select board and maybe the town should focus on, or what is the goal of our presentation?
That's what we just did, I thought.
Well,
Well,
I think,
I mean, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, I wasn't here for the other
Oh,
conversations. I
okay.
just wanted to try and clarify and have a better understanding of what the presentation is gonna be and what we're looking at.
my sense was at the time when I was thinking how we could contribute offline, is to ask each of you to, what are the areas that were of concern to you? And you've done it. And I questioned maybe some examples, whatever. So I think my thought was, this is, each of us should have an opportunity to voice whatever feedback, whatever comments we have. And this should not be the chair's sole domain. And what I can contribute, I guess, is based on what, what you've seen, is I'm proposing a structure. But there are a bunch of questions, obviously. And it may be that people will not find, they'll find problems with the way that this particular spreadsheet's been drafted, or they may find problems with anything. But so I'm looking for the select board essentially to say, let's because if we're going to move this forward, I decided we needed to have something right away. We needed to have at least a baseline.
Right.
Doesn't mean that it's what's going to be the final product, but we need a baseline in order to get started. So that's what, thank God I was in Oaxaca to do this.
Going back to do any more work down there, so. I'm gonna be seeing it here.
Volunteer.
It's nice and warm. Even hot there. Okay,
No, I wanted to, you go ahead and ask, because I want to just clarify when we leave here, what we're gonna be, what you expect. us
Okay.
to kind of do.
And I guess I was gonna go in that same direction.
Okay, good.
You know,
All right, so
looking
you
at what I think you've laid out is the tape to actually make all these recommendations into actions, and within a sequence, right? To sequence by your high, medium, low,
right, yeah,
so that we can actually start moving on things.
right.
And I think that's a great way to present probably the majority of the discussion it would be with the select board, and then looking and reviewing, critiquing, agreeing or disagreeing. But also, I think we have to be pretty clear about resources required. And you've asked those questions, but we should probably agree on some statements about resources required that we'd be recommending. And then in the beginning part of it, I think we should have some kind of summary statement as the personnel board about where we see things, and then say, here's where we see things. This is, where maybe each of us would have separate comments there. But when it gets down to, we agree that the tasks are this, do you, select board, agree and approve of this is the way forward? And do you agree that these are the resources needed to do that? That sounds like a pretty comprehensive way to approach, but that's just in, my head. But I think this was very helpful, Bill, to get us to organize around that.
I mean, one thought that I had is that, to be honest with you, there's some recommendations here that I don't agree with, and I don't think perhaps are not in service of the town or even the personnel board. And so I think maybe adding to the priority code of perhaps not recommending, or maybe that's not the right way to phrase it, but But that, like I said, I think that there are some problems, yeah, there's some problems with some of the recommendations and I think there
Do
needs
you want
to.
to get those on record?
Well, I think, well, yeah, I mean, I can put in my comments, I mean, there were specifically around time, it's getting late and it's hot in here, so I'm like, ugh. So are you not on, I'm on, so. I mean, in their executive summary, there's actually a statement in here saying, it's under classification and compensation plan. It says, in an effort to improve transparency and trust, a system for disclosure of personnel actions taken by the town manager and or human resources department should be developed and maintained. And I have a lot of issues with that because personnel issues shouldn't necessarily be disclosed. There's some serious privacy issues around that. And that's just an example of one.
What I tried to do was to take that into account because my worksheet does not, I hope, does not necessarily, they're a broad statement.
Yeah.
You know, the perception of lack of competitiveness with other municipalities, perception of turnover and vacancies. So I agree, absolutely, Kate. And if there's a better way for this worksheet to be more helpful or more thorough, I think your suggestion, you know, right now, all I see as, I mean, the purpose of this was to focus us. That is the cited deficiencies I have here. That's our focus. So
No, I agree, and I agree with the sort of broad statements. I wanted there to be a mechanism for within this grid and discussion to sort of push back on some of the recommendations that
that's
I think.
sure.
Yeah.
I agree. I actually have voiced several times about privacy and HIPAA as far as our ability to be able to look at certain kind of information. Seriously, because so that is a concern. So we need to make sure that, you know, we're doing what we really should do and not something that will be against.
I mean, I always have my HR hat on, and so you have to be really careful about personally identifiable information at all times. And so that just stuck out with me. So
One aspect of this, as I was thinking about this, was another approach would be to have it be a little bit more thematic. And what I mean, I guess, by that is there's a huge amount of effort, discussion, comment, even clearly in the personal task force document about recruiting and retention. So, you know, I decided though not to. I decided that it would be better for us to focus on the major items and incorporate that thought or keep that thought in mind as we do our work or as we set priorities. I've got some other ideas as to, you know, how to approach this, but I'm, you know, they're sort of up. I need to go back to Oaxaca, so make any progress. But anyway, I'm hearing people about recruiting and retention. So we need to keep that in mind as we do this work. All right, Kelly.
Just one final note in terms of prioritization and scheduling and milestones. One of the key points that I think we all need to keep in mind is that we really only have one bite at the apple with respect to our town meeting. The annual town meeting, we have to start working on the warrant. So in terms of evaluating all of this material and trying to set a priority to it, that there is more of a sense of urgency with respect to the bylaw, because you can only change the bylaw by bringing that to town meeting. So by virtue of us maybe separating into buckets, you just brought up an example of retention. You know, that's an interesting point that comes into everything that we do every day when we're, you know, trying to fill positions. But one of the key and primary concerns that I have as someone who's helping the town manager to make sure in the town, to make sure we're prepared for town meeting, is making sure that we're looking at The one thing that we have in front of us that does have a definite time frame is that bylaw. And in order to get that warrant or that bylaw revised, it means that we have to plug ourselves into the schedule. And in this town, they take that very seriously, as they should, which means that those items will potentially, if not, I mean, my advice is that those may have to come to the top of the pile with respect to priority, with respect to the schedule and the preparation for town meeting. So I only put that out there as another one of the many concerns that you're probably
Do you
thinking.
want to, Kelly, put dates in the minutes?
Not at this moment. I just want you all to understand that there's another very pressing time and consideration with respect to the bylaw, as opposed to the policies, because the policies, remember, we can change the policies with your approval and with the town managers.
Is it 2 months? Is it 2 weeks?
So,
Give us the ballpark.
yeah, I can put those types of deadlines into that calendar that I sent, so
Yeah.
when draft warrant articles are due, so. This is about, yeah, I think it's December, sorry. I can pull it up, but it's like, we're at that time, then.
So what you basically are saying is that we should really look at the bylaws and decide if there's if we want to do anything, change any of the bylaws. That would be number one, because I do know you have to present, then it has to be in, and well, Bill, you did that last year.
Hmm.
You know?
I do.
I mean, I can tell you.
Agony.
I think, this is just my opinion, I think we're only gonna be able to tackle or to deal with the low hanging fruit.
Okay.
I think, and that may only be one or a few things for the change.
Right.
I think what we really need to do is, it's too soon for us to really refresh, redo. We don't have enough time.
Right.
And there's too much that needs to be accomplished in some ways through the project here of the deficiencies. Anyway, I don't think we have enough time other than to tackle the low hanging fruit.
Does that include the bylaw change in time for a warrant? Because if it waits another year. And if it's correct that employees of the town are dissatisfied, then this becomes old news a year from now, putting in a warrant that we need to change the bylaw. So is the bylaw on the category of low hanging fruit or not?
Well, my sense is the specific changes in low hanging.
To the bylaw?
To the bylaw,
Okay, and that has to go to warrant.
right,
Okay,
and it essentially has to be approved by the select board, and I mean, there, in my mind, there's just not enough time.
for what?
Not enough time for us to have a thorough restatement of the bylaw.
But some restatement of the bylaw. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
And I'm categorizing that, perhaps not too precisely, the low hanging fruit. And some of that will come from Amy, because she's got some, we've got obviously some positions that have to be included in the warrant. But we're not at all prepared, I don't think, nor is the, well, I can't speak for the select board, to make some major changes
And I don't
in
even,
the personnel bylaw.
right, and I don't even think we even were thinking about it anyway. I mean, or we're, I'm sorry. Because we've been so busy with everything else that I didn't even think about doing something with the bylaws.
Yeah, so in terms of overall structure of the bylaw and where it goes, I don't think that can be something that we do in weeks. Yes, as to where certain sections that every year we may recommend changes on. It's been difficult right now. We would have liked to have been talking with you about some of that, but your agendas have been full and there's been a lot happening. We're waiting for the task force report. Some things that I am aware of that have come out of our discussions with employees, things that are of interest that I don't know, that others were mentioned in the task force, but, and I'm not saying they weren't either, but, the section on longevity pay. That's something that some employees are concerned about. There's been a longstanding philosophy related to that, but that's something that this town manager would like to talk about. There are some things about the acting pay section that we might, and these aren't huge changes, but
Acting one.
acting pay. So when does somebody get acting pay? And I'm interested in knowing more about something that is on the in the task force report related to pay on reclassifications. There were some indication that had thought that we had violated sections of the bylaw. I'm not aware of what they think was violation, and so I would like some clarification to understand how that's being interpreted in a way that perhaps I haven't interpreted or had other people interpret. So I don't know if we have a problem. Well, we obviously have a problem there if there are thoughts that we do that. So to me, I would like to explore that. Whether we can do that in the weeks that we have between now and when the warrant is due, I don't know. And it's been very challenging since we haven't been able to have meetings. And when we've had meetings, we haven't we just haven't had enough time to get through it in that schedule. That is part of why I had in that calendar just been trying to pick up as many dates as I could to see a very much more intensive weekly schedule in what I proposed, and I proposed it months ago based on what I knew you had told me about when you were available and we'd have a forum again. So that's why it shows weekly meetings, because I think we need to be talking about those things. And yet there's also the employee appeal, and there's the class and comp study that's going to require a lot, and then of course responding to this generally
In the board meeting.
with the select board.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's partly my rationale on we can't do everything.
Right.
And what we have to do is decide what we can do and who has to be the initiator of what we can do. And you identified longevity pay and acting pay. I think those are, that in my mind, that's doable. That you may have some other examples. So can we ask you for the next meeting agenda to list any additional ones here that are sort of, and maybe some of them are going to still only be in discussion stage, but what we have 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe?
Yeah, I pulled up the calendar. So there's when there's the date that they like to have drafts, but I don't think that's a legal deadline. That's helping the process to go through. That's December 16th, the draft warrant articles. Then the warrant closes on January 4th.
Okay.
And
So our time is really limited.
Yeah. Especially with
And I think
holidays.
to set an expectation that we're going to have a major rewrite, a major change with a whole new approach, that's just not gonna, that won't work. We can't do it. We can't do it. And we just should, I think, just admit that, okay, what are we going to tackle? And I'm suggesting Amy come at the next agenda with those items that, based on her knowledge and her understanding of what's needed. Absolutely. Those are the ones we should take on. Is that sort of is an agreement with Liz? Are you okay with that?
So you'd be referring to policies and procedures versus the bylaw.
the first thing would be any bylaw changes,
Okay.
the bylaw.
Right.
And then from that, we can develop policy and
Oh, okay.
procedures, but
I
it means
didn't
we're
know
not
if we
stuck
would
for
have
another
enough
year.
time to do the bylaw.
I think there are a few that we might have enough time to
Okay.
do,
Okay.
so, but we're going to try to do that. And then I think, the class and comp study, and the results of that is huge. I mean, that's a big undertaking, and there's a lot to do, and we need to talk about that. That goes into the bylaws. We need to make sure we properly structure a warrant article that allows for whatever action is going to happen with the class and comp. So,
That's why we have Kelly. She's gonna be able to synthesize, compress,
They need
and everything.
shield of armor in front of them.
It's all on your shoulders.
I know that Terry Ackerman has been and is raising her hand. Also,
Okay.
if you want to recognize.
Yes, Terry. Please, I will write.
I want to thank Bill for organizing that. I think it's going to be extremely helpful when you come with the select board. If you have things that are high priority, medium priority, low, and you have timetables. I mean, even if you just do some low hanging fruit this year for this bylaw, but you have a plan that for next year, you have 12 months. You keep going and you do the medium priorities or whatever's next on the list. I think employees want to see some movement and some progress. They know it can't be done in a day. So I think this is extremely helpful how you have it organized, and just to keep going, even after
And
the town meeting, keep going for next year.
Okay, we'll continue to rely on your counsel. And if you have a spare moment, you're going to come in and help us.
Sure.
Any other points before I open it up for any public comment? I mean, we are having fun and it's 7:40. Yes,
I was just going to make a recommendation if the board is willing. What I thought was interesting, at least when I've read the report at different stages, is that while it was sort of fresh in my mind, I jotted down my notes, and then I've actually since that time have put it into a spreadsheet just so that I can sort of capture those fine points that I don't want to overlook later. And so I guess the suggestion would be, I know that you can't share those notes outside of the meeting. However, if you are so willing and you'd like to, I know that Kate, you had talked about maybe going through it. If you want to go through, make your notes and submit any feedback or thoughts or ideas. Amy and I will be working together specifically on, this is one of those big projects. I'd be happy to, if it's helpful, to take those responses and at least have a way to sort of formulate them together in terms of the bigger picture. So
I think that's the job of the personnel board.
Exactly.
Right? And
I'm
Bill's
only
done such a good job to set us up for that.
Yeah.
So I think, with this discussion with the low hanging fruit and so forth, that's something that, we have our comments, we've submitted the overarching comments. And I do think that's, I'm happy to be the scribe in that case and put, from our notes and so forth, to put it forward. But I do think we owe that to the select board, to take responsibility for that. So.
Oh, and I wasn't suggesting otherwise. I apologize if I misspoke. All I'm suggesting is that if there are any further revisions, if you didn't want to wait till the next meeting, feel free to just let us know how we can be of assistance to you with the process. It wasn't to circumvent that. So I apologize.
Oh, I see. So you're talking about the idea that we can't have a meeting outside of the public.
Right.
Meeting.
So if you needed a way to submit your comments, whatever they might be after
I could take additional comments from each one separately and put them forward, because that would be one-on-one.
don't know that's the
Once you get them from us,
Then I can turn them over to you and you can forward to all of us, right? I also wanted to, I don't have the calendar, it's not coming up easily on my thing, but we all said we could attend on November 14th.
right?
So if we need another meeting, we have that time open. Is that still possible?
I think we know the posting problem with that, because it would have been as a joint meeting with the select board, and so. I thought it was going that way, and
Right.
today would have been the deadline for posting it.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought I was going the other direction, and I would have reserved that date for you, but I didn't understand how it
Yeah,
how
yeah.
it landed.
No,
So we
that's-
can't do that particular one now.
Okay. All right, all right. But it seems to me if I click one by one and don't share across, that's not having a meeting. But then I send it over to you, Amy, to send out for our next meeting. And do we have a meeting set before the meeting with the select board? Is that right?
No, we don't. Then we have the 28th.
Yeah, all right. And then it's the 30th, right? Yeah, yeah. So we're after. We do need one more agreement meeting, I think, before going before select board, right? I mean,
Well, I think, do we need another meeting? Yes, if you're suggesting we have a summary of all of our thoughts articulated on a piece of paper.
well,
If otherwise,
responding to what Terry just said, though, I think you've given us a really good base that we have to put in all the yes and by when and so forth, and have that kind of firmed up. So we say to the select board, you know, we have some other questions. We have some questions about, you know, privacy issues and so forth. What we know we can get done, and the most urgent is, and that sort of agreements, we don't quite have that yet, right?
well, what I was concerned about and what my thinking was that we need to get the select board involved in that decision making, setting the priorities. If we don't have any input yet, we can obviously come up, I guess, with a recommendation.
Yeah, that's
It's
what I was
gonna
thinking.
take another meeting though,
Yeah.
which,
Is it, I mean, the select board isn't as on top, I'm sure, of this long report as we are. So we'd be saying, you have the report, of course, and you can say we missed something, but to our best effort, we came up with this way of making an action item list, and here's what we know we can do forward. And it's Terry's words are borrowing, but to show that we're moving things along and that not everything will get done, like you said, with that low hanging fruit. I just can't imagine that with all the other work they're doing, the select board is going to say, actually, you know, here are 3, you know, like that's where we come in to say, you know, we've been working and engaging in that. So
Well,
it does require another meeting though. So you're right. Can we do that?
and there's also the question of what input should we be taking, asking the town manager? That is, we've got the select board as a body, we've got the town manager,
It'll be at the meeting, right? At the select board meeting.
but yeah, right. I'm right. She would be at the meeting. Well, I think she'd be at the meeting. Yeah. Yes.
So, yeah, so it would be the same situation where we'd be saying, here's our concerted efforts and recommendation, and now do you all agree, or did we miss something, or, you know, so that we can do that short list, just as you put it out on that Excel. I think that was really, I mean, the recommendations that I stated, I think were maybe interesting, but they weren't as concrete as the ones you gave, though, which were very helpful to get us to action. Right, and so we're almost there. So if we can find another chance before, because now it's the 28th, right? I mean, that's a little more leeway next week, potentially, hopefully not Thanksgiving week, but maybe next week we could do something.
So
Hey, it's real trial by fire here.
what is, what's the posting requirement for if we wanted to do something next week, Monday, we're too late?
Monday too late, but we could still do anything after that. It's a 48-hour reservation, not counting the holidays.
But then I guess, and you may not be able to.
Is there any, what about Tuesday night? the 15th? Yeah.
I actually have my own personnel board that night.
Oh, you do?
Not work for me.
Keita, I have a question, and this is an ask that you should give this over your own job. Do you ever have availability during the day
I
for
do.
meetings?
Yeah, I can make some time.
So just to keep that in mind, I do think it's very helpful to staff and employees to know when the board is going to meet as a regular member. When you have a particular task that you need to be doing, if that that helps to have a meeting at a different time of day, we can do that.
The primary objective of it, just so we're all in agreement, is to complete the worksheet, complete the
Yeah.
spreadsheet. The time for the employee appeal proceeding is going to be deferred until the 30th.
You know, I asked them whether that date would work,
Okay,
so I
well,
don't
that's-
think I'll know that till next week,
Okay,
but
that's the
yes, I think this is a workshop for you on a particular topic.
Well, should we go home, do whatever we need to do and make certain about, and tentatively say next Wednesday, the 16th?
I have a board meeting on Wednesday.
Oh,
About Tuesday. Oh, morning.
Well, I have a meeting at 4. My board meets at 4, and those are usually about 2 hours, maybe a little more.
we shouldn't interfere with that day, so
We don't want to get you after that.
No, not a good idea.
we're sure the 17th, Thursday.
That works for me too. I'm open.
How's that fit with?
Yeah. Morning doesn't work, but any other time. I have a commitment at 4:30, but could we just make it 4? Are we looking during the day? Is that?
I could do it too. I could make that work.
Okay.
Oh, that would be good.
So Amy, 2 to 4.
On Thursday, the 17th. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, and that gives us a hard stop because we'll lose Nancy.
And my thought is that each of us complete the worksheet.
Yeah.
On priority.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And then that way we're
All right, the worksheet, and you're looking at
the last priority code.
down the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I know we just agreed on that, but could we do it at like 3 instead of 2?
No, because Nancy
So
has to
you
go
can't-
somewhere by
you can't.
4.
Okay. No, I mean, I can make that work. I can make it work. Yeah, I can.
Okay.
All right, well, I'll complete the spreadsheet, so it's real homework, all right. And then we bring it, right? And then you and Kelly don't have extra work too.
That's
Right.
great. I was just afraid we wouldn't have a chance to meet. That's perfect.
It may be just off the top of my head is if we have one of the items. My code here. High, okay, so we've got 6 highs. I would circle and enumerate, which is 1 through 6. That's my example, 6 highs. So we know what the priority is with those 6. Because we essentially have a subcode that we'll be establishing. I don't mean to be so quantitative, but
No,
we got high, and then, okay, so we got 6 highs. Then the question is, what do we think we should tackle first? And if each of us do that math, I think it'll help speed up the
that sounds
process.
great. Yeah.
Synergy, that's what I'm thinking. ABC, 1, 2, 3.
So I'm sorry, I'm thinking logistics, so I'll try to get this room if we can, it might have to be somewhere else. I'm just checking in now too, we've been doing more in person instead of, and having this, but is that working? Is everybody still, is in person?
Sure.
The way that we're going, and is this a workshop? I'm not in any way trying to keep people out of it, but are we trying to set up the Zoom capability for the workshop as well, or?
I think that would be transparent and, it might be that we have some other good comments that help us to prioritize. So,
Right.
yeah.
I know we're trying to suggest we not, I just wanted to make sure we get it all in. I'm thinking about the slot, like what options I have to try to find, I don't know, during that slot, so that's all. Okay.
All right,
Thank
so I'm going to move to the next item, which is public comment. What I'm disappointed is we have 750 people who initially started with us. Down to.
7.
All right.
And if there's any public comment, this is the time for people to raise their hand. Arm. Okay, not seeing any. I thank those of you who have participated on Zoom for your presence, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would be happy to make a motion to adjourn. 7:54 on the evening of November.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, Nancy, Liz, Kate, I, and.
Aye. Sorry.
All right.
It's a long day.
I think it's a very long day.
Pretty good about it. What we've accomplished.